Hello everyone, here's another video on the channel. For those who haven't subscribed yet, please do so. Leave a like if you enjoy the content, share it, and feel free to leave your comments below. Today, I want to talk a bit about individual responsibility and its consequences, especially when it comes to love, in quotes. Because the way Western society, both modern and postmodern, views love is completely distorted. Because of the passion for eros, which is something recent in humanity on a large scale, not in conceptual terms. The Greeks, centuries ago, had already identified this. Plato even saw it as a kind of illness. But in terms of literature and culture, people believe that what makes a couple is love, eros, and not a solid foundation for building a family, raising children, like it was for a long time in civilizations. And I'm just mentioning this here. I'm not making any moral judgment saying that people have to get married to have kids. I'm not romanticizing motherhood or having children. No, I'm just making a historical reference here because sometimes someone comes along and gives a pretty dubious interpretation of what was said. So, this whole thing about individual responsibility, since people have this idea of amoreros, and amoreros is kind of like a perfect connection. Nowadays, people prefer that word. You can see it's a word that comes from the underground, yes. This idea of a connection between souls, physical attraction, a typical phrase from people who are stuck single. Physical attraction is common, mental connection is rare. And then you see, of course, it's rare because we know it's the woman. She has a standard to which she can really fall madly in love, which is the outstanding, mysterious, insensitive man. One with status, etc. And very handsome. Sometimes the guy doesn't even have to be that rich, but he has to be really good looking. So women, since they have a father, especially in Brazil, which is a country where most men are poor and unattractive, and that's just the truth. A pretty bitter pill to swallow is that not only I, but other content creators have already been saying this. Latin countries in general, men just aren't up to the standard that most women want. There are studies that show this. Anyway, when I make the video about male attractiveness, I'll bring all that data. So this video about male attractiveness that I'm talking about, I will make it. It's not that I'm stalling. Just making a quick comment here now. A little side note in the middle of the video, if you're a content creator, sometimes for those who are just subscribers, when I was just a subscriber, I used to think, why do they keep saying they're going to do something and then don't? But some days, we really need a certain kind of inspiration to talk about certain topics. And sometimes you know you have to talk about it, but it just doesn't come out. And since I don't edit or anything, mainly because I don't like it and I don't know how, I'm honestly pretty clueless when it comes to editing. I just don't enjoy it. So it has to be something natural, you know? And since I know it's something I'm going to be talking about for 25 to 30 minutes, it's definitely going to be the longest video on the Blaze and Ascalina's channel. So I have to be somewhat prepared for it, so it comes out as naturally as possible. But getting back to individual responsibility, when you have this issue of romantic love ingrained in society and people want these perfect connections, that music video kind of love, the love you see in commercials, in Coca-Cola ads and so on, those beautiful couples playing video games, eating pizza, that famous partnership in dating. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist because I know couples who are real exceptions who, in a way, have a really great partnership in their man-woman relationship. But we know that's the exception. We can't take the exception as the rule. So, one of the biggest difficulties people have in accepting individual responsibility is that a healthy relationship, a healthy marriage, is not something democratic. In modern times, in postmodern times, people want everything. They want luxury, comfort, technology, perfect friendships, perfect love. They want it all at once. A perfect career, perfect trips. And while today you have some comforts and luxuries that you didn't have in the past, like the internet, streaming services, some restaurants, even though in Brazil we're going through a terrible crisis with severe inflation, some types of food have become more accessible, as well as some cosmetic procedures. So for women anyway, right? You end up losing other things along the way. You start losing that thing of, this used to happen a lot in small towns. It still happens, but less often now. People would stay up late, talking in chairs outside, hanging out until late at night, and it used to be much more common. That's fading away. I talked a lot about this in my video on romantic nostalgia, but that's something that's getting lost because of smartphones. People are moving away, there's more migration between cities, and so on. So, people, many of them, have even managed to improve their lives financially and materially. But they've lost a bit of that essence of friendship, of getting together, and other social activities. But women have a really hard time accepting this individual responsibility, bringing it now more to the micro level than the macro, to their personal and romantic lives. And that things aren't going to work out so well. That video I made, Why Single Women Won't Have a Happy Ending, I ended up talking about the behaviors that lead to this, like partying in your youth, not caring about anything serious, like being in a monogamous relationship from a young age and all that, even though I also see a lot of flaws in monogamy, but that's a topic for another video. It's just that, here's the thing. I'm talking about the big difference in individual responsibility between men and women. For example, men. So that's what a lot of my subscribers and people from similar channels have already decided to talk about. Look, I don't know, maybe a miracle happened? The poles reversed, the magnetic poles flicked. No, I'm not gonna keep going. I don't feel like dating, I don't feel like getting married, I don't feel like having kids. And from what I'm seeing, the guys are taking responsibility for that. Why am I saying this? Because I see a lot of subscribers here who come and say they're already over 40, 45, and they say they're at peace, that they have peace of mind. Some have already been married and never want that again. But anyway, some guys might come here, maybe some blue-pilled guy or a woman, and say they're lying because they're unhappy, they want a woman. I don't really agree with that because as a man, I know how male nature works, how male loneliness works. It exists in two situations. The first is from a lack of sexual relations. So men have a really strong libido, and their loneliness is tied to that. I've even made a video talking about this. And the other part of loneliness is when a guy gets dumped. When a guy gets kicked to the curb, when a woman breaks up with him, which is how most relationships end, whether it's dating or marriage, it's usually the woman who ends it because she thinks she deserves something better. Men do suffer, yes, from relationship heartbreak, but since a lot of these guys haven't been involved, haven't been in a relationship for a while, they've already had an awakening, so they're pretty chill now. Now, with women, it's a little different, because it's not just me, the source. This isn't just about my social experiences. It's about the number of antidepressants women take. Even though, unfortunately, the number of men who take their own lives is higher for women, and that's also a sad statistic. Unfortunately, that's the case for women too. It's also very high because they take a larger amount of antidepressants. You see it on social media. This is obvious to everyone. You don't need any study to prove it. That women are always posting little quotes, sharing things. They're much more needy, wanting relationships more than men, even though they suffer much less when a breakup happens. But that suffering for women comes much later, after they turn 30. So where does individual responsibility come into this? When she was young, she cut off a bunch of guys who were on her level. Because of women's hypergamy, she rejects guys who are average or on her own level, no matter how attractive she is. If he's on the same level, she won't accept him. She thinks that when she turns 30 or 35, like, there are already videos about this. There are already some women talking about this. They're already putting it out there. The best feedback about men actually comes from women themselves. That's unanimous. In the middle of the feedback from women, they're saying it, look. Speaking for women as a group, we women are really picky and all that. And then when we hit 40 or 50, men don't look at us anymore. They only want the younger girls. It's a sad reality. That's it. So this issue of individual responsibility, when they're young, they don't care about that. And the consequences are severe later on because unlike men who suffer in these situations, since when a man feels deprived, when his libido kicks in, he has the option to pay to solve that. I'm not going to make any moral judgments here. You're on the wrong channel if you're looking for moral judgment. About what's right or wrong in these matters, that's not what I do here. Here, we work with stimuli and rewards set up in the environment in a Pavlovian way. My videos are basically about that, with maybe a nuance here or there that's a little different. So men have the option to pay. And women, since they don't have that libido, that strong testosterone like men do, they can't really understand what men see in all that, or in casual app hookups, and so on, in case the guy doesn't want to pay. So yes, it's men who find this interesting, Because just like men don't understand a lot of female behaviors, like the ego boost from getting so many likes, so many poses, so many angles on Instagram, men see this as something bizarre, just like how women get emotional over weddings and celebrity quotes. And Anderson Nunez and Louis Ossens and Love is Beautiful men, them too. They think that's ridiculous. Well, anyway, everyone has their own idea of what makes the opposite sex ridiculous. But men, in general, they have the option to pay. Now, women don't. They're crying into their pillows, yes, because they're ending up alone. It's really hard. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's a small number, even because I know some. So, yes, it does exist. There's a very small number, which Raccoon estimates to be between 1 and 5% based on social observations. I also agree with that number. At most, 5% of women who are truly detached and have a more masculine brain in this regard, in knowing how to deal with loneliness. A man doesn't know how to deal with a breakup, but he knows how to deal with loneliness as long as he's healed and not suffering because of anyone. As long as he's healed from his last breakup, he's able to move on with his life. Women don't. Women don't care when they break up. They'll only be bothered if the guy they broke up with really makes it in life, or shows up with a woman who's prettier than she is. That's when the pain of the ego hits. The only way a woman suffers after a breakup is if her ex shows up with a more attractive woman. Otherwise, women don't suffer because of that. I'm not making a moral judgment about women's here. It's not that women are cold, insensitive, or lack character. It's not that at all. That's just nature. A woman's love isn't the same as a man's love in this heterosexual context. A woman's love is much more tied to her offspring, her children, and not to her husband or boyfriend. That's just obvious. To wrap up the video, pay close attention to this issue of individual responsibility, because people aren't accepting it. People have a really hard time with this, and that's true for all kinds of people. Whether you're a man, a woman, blue pill, or red pill, obviously, blue pill people, regardless of gender, are going to struggle more with this, because they don't accept that we're living in a time of civilizational decline when it comes to marriage. We're at the peak in terms of technology and the flow of information. And access, for example, to nutrition and healthcare today, for those who are middle class and above, obviously, because in a country like Brazil, poor people aren't going to have access to high quality proteins and so on. But for those who are lower middle class in wealthy countries, in Brazil you have to be at least middle class because here it's a poor country currency-wise. Weak currency. Today you have things that were unimaginable before. Antibiotics, you have access to nutrition, understanding how obesity works, how to nourish yourself, vaccines, and so on. So it's a really interesting thing that exists in society today. That's right. But when it comes to relationships, man and woman, a happy family, that whole thing, Brazil in the 1920s, the 1910s, which a lot of people criticize, well, everyone has their own take on that. So which is better, today or back then? And here, we're just here to analyze the situation. But people don't want to accept that today's environment is completely rotten for relationships. They want to have it all, but you just can't have everything. Today, there are all kinds of benefits, which I mentioned before, thanks to technological development and globalization. I don't really like that word, but it's the one that came to mind right now. But when it comes to relationships, society is really torn apart. Divorce rates are going up, more and more single mothers, pregnancies are almost always unplanned. In the past, pregnancy was a reason for celebration. Now it's like, oh my god, my life is over. Even for couples who have been together for a while and have some stability. Anyway, the situation is pretty chaotic in this issue of individual responsibility means accepting that, especially for women, the choices you make when you're young can be really, really damaging down the line. So if men aren't interested in dating women over 30, it's not because they are insecure or can't handle dating women who are independent or any of those silly Instagram catchphrases. They just simply don't want to. Just like you, I'm a strong supporter of no means no. If a woman says no, it's no. And if a man says no to dating a woman over 30, that's okay too. So everyone has to deal with their own loneliness. I think right now, and this is one of the few times, sometimes I do this on the channel, but it's not really my thing. I'm giving my 2 cents in my opinion here, that men tend to suffer a lot less than women from this loneliness after 30. That's how I see it. That's how I see it because I've already said that men's suffering is very conditioned. Libido and breakups, sure, but when it comes to loneliness itself, I think women suffer much more. And that's just my personal view. So here's today's message. Personal responsibility is really important for men. It's time for people to start understanding the actions and consequences of certain behaviors they have, not just women, but men too. A big hug to everyone.